Welcome to Dog Life Radio.
Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Rossi Gigio and welcome to Dog Life Radio. I hope everybody's doing fine. We've got ourselves a really cool episode, interesting guest to talk to. I had a great time talking with this gentleman. For those of you who are familiar with or aware of the concept of barefoot running, you may be aware of this gentleman. Barefoot Ken Bob Saxton, author, blogger, pioneer, godfather, guru, all of this in the realm of barefoot running. So Barefoot Ken Bob, he goes by Ken Bob because there's a lot of guys named Ken in the barefoot running world. Anyway, I had the chance to talk to him a bit about what is this whole thing, barefoot running. I get it, you're running around without shoes on, but there's more to it than that. Some interesting stuff. We talk about how the shoes that you're wearing can and do have an impact on your health, your overall, injuries. You get the shin splints, you get straining of the knees, the hips, the back, everything, because you're putting on these gigantic Bobo shoes, as I've been told. Anyway, these shoes with giant, thick soles. It impacts everything to do with your gait. And anyway, Barefoot Ken Bob and I sit down and we have a pretty good conversation about how he got involved into this space, how he got exposed to it, learned more, and actually what you can do as a beginner in this space. Now, I know I'm not a runner. I don't really go out and run. I don't enjoy it, but I do know it's a good part of a good workout, a good training and health and fitness program. So here's something to consider. Yeah, you can do it outside barefoot. You can run on pavement, through the woods. We talk about that. Or you could also do it on your treadmill at home or at a gym. So don't feel like you're getting yourself boxed into a spot where you don't have the ability to do this, because you do. Anyway, that's the intro. Had a great talk with him. Enjoy. Check him out on Facebook. Just look up Barefoot Ken Bob. His last name is Saxton, Saxton. Check it out. You can get a link to his website. You can take a look at the many different books that he has authored and had a lot of great success there. Hope you enjoy it. Have fun.
This is Rossi Gigio of Dog Life Radio, and I am here with Barefoot Ken Saxton. How are you doing today, Ken?
All right. Generally, it's Barefoot Ken Bob because there's too many other Kens and too many other Bobs.
Oh, Barefoot Ken Bob. How are you doing then?
All right.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for joining me today. It's interesting, as I have become recently more aware of the barefoot. I don't want to call it the barefoot movement, but just barefoot running in general.
Uh-huh.
And your name came up, your book came up, and I'm in the middle of reading it. But I really wanted to get you on so I could talk to you a little bit more about, everything about how you got into or aware of barefoot running and everything else. So I figured we could start there, if you don't mind. How did you get first exposed to it?
Well, the weird thing about me is that I never had a transitional phase. I mean, there was a phase where I transitioned into becoming, running more mileage and realizing I could run barefoot on the roads and any place else. But I was actually, unlike apparently most people, I was born without shoes on my feet. And so in northern rural Michigan, we did tend to wear boots in the wintertime and at school, but most of the time I was in the summertime outside playing around barefoot. So I didn't have that same transition that a lot of people have where I had to take my shoes off. When I trained for my first marathon, I actually put shoes on for part of the run and then ran along the beach 8 miles barefoot. So that's actually caused me a problem in the marathon because my feet weren't really used to running that distance with shoes on. So I got horrible blisters all over the tops, sides, the backs of my feet. My toenails all turned black. But the bottoms of my feet were fine.
Oh, so it sounds like you'd been doing it a long time. It felt more natural that way to you.
Yes. Actually, when I did have shoes, I tended to get ones, what you call nowadays racing flats or minimalist, but it's basically just whatever the cheapest shoe I could find that wasn't too heavy and bulky. I didn't think so much about the cushioning then, and when I started thinking about it more, then I realized that actually is a issue with people, because the more cushioning you have on your shoe, there's a tendency to try to land harder, not more softly. And so the cushioning doesn't decrease the impact on your knees and your structure as much as what it decreases the feeling of the impact on the soles of your feet. So that's where we had a lot of problems with people getting back pains and knee pains and all sorts of pains. A lot of our runners, Barefoot Ted, I'll name drop here, for example, but he's not alone. We had several runners in our discussion groups that couldn't run more than a few miles in shoes without getting knee and back pains. And then when they started running barefoot, well, like Ted's gone on to do ultras, and everyone else has gone on to do longer runnings up to marathons and more.
So Ted's doing ultra marathons barefoot.
He has. Well, yeah, a lot of people are now, or at least in the minimalist sandals.
My God. So an ultra marathon is what? Isn't that like 100 miles?
Well, it's anything longer than a marathon, which is 26.2 miles. So typically the next step up is a 50-kilometer. But he has done some 100-milers. I don't know if he's done a 100-mile completely barefoot. He has done marathons barefoot. I've done them with him. So, but several other people have too. I did a 50K once barefoot.
That's nuts. Doing 50K is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So, and you did it barefoot. Okay, so I imagine. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, the funny thing is that it's actually when I first started getting into the higher mileage, and this was in the mid-'90s. Actually, my first official barefoot race was like '98. But I was under the mistaken impression that it would be better to run barefoot on trails than on roads. But actually, roads are a lot more comfortable. So that 50K and my first barefoot marathon were both trail races, which are really more challenging because of the inconsistent terrain and gravel, sticks, things like that.
And because on the pavement it's more level and consistent, your body can get adjusted to that type of an approach?
Mostly because it's smooth. Mostly. It's not all pavement smooth, obviously. It's like the difference between running on butter and running on sticks and stones.
Man, now so I would imagine does the pavement, like when it's really hot, that's got to be something that you're not, if you're running through dirt trails and stuff, you don't have to worry about the heat of concrete or asphalt.
Yeah, well, and most of the trail runs we've done are usually forested, so they're shady. And the roads really aren't generally a problem. Most people run in the morning before they get hot. Mm-hmm. And I live down here at the beach, so they rarely get very hot, except maybe August. In the late afternoon, the pavement might be a little warm. But we've got a breeze blowing off the Pacific Ocean that keeps it pretty cool. The other thing is actually the hot pavement's actually worse if you're walking on it barefoot than running, because your feet are actually getting more wind and they're not on the road as long. In between being on the road, they're in the air.
Oh, yeah. Yep, because of your stride pace.
Yeah.
Yep. So, okay.
So you're just touching the pavement. Okay, you're just touching the pavement for a short period.
Yep. Okay. So you had mentioned earlier you were talking about injuries that people were suffering, and not necessarily, I don't think you specifically said because they're wearing the shoes, but the shoes with the thick soles and so forth can lead to those injuries. And I just wanted to talk a bit more about that.
Yeah, I'll paraphrase Dr. Lieberman, the He's the doctor that's quoted a lot in the book Born to Run, but it's something along the lines of shoes don't necessarily make you run badly, but you don't necessarily know if you're running badly when you're wearing shoes. Something like that. That's not the exact quote. That's the idea of it, is that you can't tell. When you're barefoot, you know exactly how your feet are interacting with the surface that you're running on, with each and every step. When you're in shoes, you're kind of guessing at that, and you're getting a very dull thud feeling, not accurate perception of, when you're barefoot, you know whether your forefoot's landing first, your heel's landing first. You know how much pressure you're putting on. You know if you're skidding or spinning out or twisting your feet if you're barefoot on, especially what I like to call the salad. Actually, the gravelly, rough surfaces will actually teach you a lot more quickly.
How so?
Because you get a much more intense feedback. So
when you're stepping wrong, you feel it right away?
Yeah, one of the other big misconceptions is that you should start on sand or grass, and if you take that quote out of context, then you're going to mess up a lot of people. What happens? Yeah, if you start barefoot and you don't know what you're doing, and you say, "Oh, I got to go out and run on some grass or on the beach sand," the two problems with that is the lack of feedback. But more importantly, there's stuff hiding in the sand and the grass. So I just did a run a couple of weeks ago with a group from Nike, a Nike free class they had, but they wanted me to there and talk about barefoot running, and we went for a little run on the beach sand, and I warned them, not all of you are going to cut your feet in the beach, but there is, clamshells, beer bottles, whatever, hiding in their sharp rocks, and you won't see them before you land on them. And so somebody might cut their foot, and somebody did. So it's quite common. I live down here at the beach, so we quite often see people in the summer, early summer especially, some kids or somebody that have had their feet inside shoes all winter, and they take their shoes off and go run across the sand and slice their foot open. Just because their feet aren't conditioned, they're not running as gently as they could be, because the sand allows you to land harder and not be aware of it. So there's just really, I encourage people to start off at least on a hard surface, but even better is a rough one that's painful to run on. It'll also keep you from doing too much too soon, the old nasty too much too soon problem.
So I was going to ask you, so if a mistake is potentially to run on the beach for the reasons you were just talking about, so what would be the best place to start for a novice runner? Like go out on the road and do a certain amount of time, or what are your thoughts there?
Definitely on a road or pavement or a hard packed trail, and one with roughness is good. Something that's going to actually stimulate the soles of your feet and let you know, number one, if you're landing too hard, if you're skidding, twisting your feet, spinning, if you're not distributing the pressure evenly across your whole sole. Ultimately, one of the misconceptions is the forefoot landing, which should actually be called a forefoot first landing. But we don't even have to focus on that. If you use the correct technique, your foot is going to land and you're going to use the whole sole. But if you're running fast, you're going to be more toward the front of the foot, but you still want the heel to come down. You want your calves to relax so that the heel can come down. But anyway, back to starting out, is that rough surface you'll have to pretty much pretend you're sneaking up on somebody. Bend your knees, and keep a vertical posture and just walk or run really gently. In fact, you can start by walking first and practicing walking. I think everybody should practice walking, because if you live long enough, you might not be able to run anymore, and walking is a great way to get around.
It works for me, that's for sure.
Yeah, in fact, my 82-year uncle can't drive because he can't see well enough and can't really afford a car. So, walking is really his only choice right now, other than riding with somebody else.
So maybe even starting off walking with a good walk barefoot and feeling. So,
yeah.
And you were saying you had said the feedback. You get instant feedback if you're on a trail or something that doesn't have enough roughness to it. Your feet need to interpret the feedback of how you're approaching things. And I was going to ask you, how do you actually interpret that feedback? Are you feeling like the pain of something where it's to a certain level, or is it you should feel like the texture across the width of your foot holistically across the foot, the bottom of it?
Well, ultimately, it is a pain, and it should be. If you're running too hard, or you're landing too hard with too much impact or skidding your feet, it should hurt when you're doing it badly. And that's the big problem with shoes, and even minimalist shoes when you're beginning, is you don't actually learn not to do those things because there's no consequence to it, no immediate consequence. There may be a long-term consequence with injured knees and chronic injuries. One of the big problems we have with the minimalist footwear is people start out on that, and one of the reasons they wear the minimalist footwear is they want to work their way down to barefoot, but they really should be working the other way, because when you become better at running, then you can wear shoes, and like we said, you may not be aware of what you're doing in shoes, but you will be aware of it when you're barefoot. But anyway, so with minimalist shoes, a lot of people go out and they hear this forefoot landing. They don't think, I should be landing on my forefoot first and letting my heel down. And in fact, they're overthinking it too much anyway if you're trying to think of how your foot should be landing, because that's all depending on what the rest of your body does. But with the minimalist shoes, it's actually kind of comfortable to stay up there, and then after a couple of weeks, they'll get sore calves, and then they get, because they're putting so much stress on their foot, trying to stay up on the front of their foot, the metatarsal actually, a lot of people get stress fracture. The first warning is if you get sore calves, because you're trying to stay up on that foot, so you're putting a lot of strain on the calves. And then those will build up, the muscles and tendons will get stronger, but then a lot of people get that stress fracture in their metatarsal.
So that first sign you were saying of like a sign that you're too much on the front of your foot is when you're starting to really feel it in your calves. You're getting in the strain, and then it can lead to other things you were saying.
Now that's with minimalist footwear. If you're barefoot, you're going to feel that right away. You're going to, the less surface area of your sole that's being utilized to contact a rough surface, the more painful it is. It's the bed of nails theory.
Yep.
If you spread your whole body weight out across the bed of nails, the nails don't puncture, and actually can be, so I've heard, kind of comfortable, but I haven't tried it. But if you try to stand on a bed of nails with one foot, you've only got a few points that are supporting your entire body weight. So it's going to either, if it doesn't puncture, it's at least going to hurt.
Yeah.
So same thing, you want so that rough gravel, you want to spread your feet over as many of those sharp rocks as you can, not as few as you can.
Makes sense. Makes sense when you spell it out like that.
And this is for learning. This isn't like you have to run on rough gravel the rest of your life and only exclusively on rough gravel. That's what I call the grass and the sand and smooth roads dessert. And once you start learning to run more gently, it all becomes dessert.
Okay. So once you start running more gently, it all becomes dessert?
Yes, because it's no longer horribly painful to run even on rough terrain. Well, the soles of your feet will get a little thicker too, so you become a little less sensitive. But you've also learned to run more gently.
Gotcha. I was going to ask you about the bottoms of your feet. Like they've got to toughen up, and you had just mentioned that. So, so your feet, like how thick and tough are yours? I imagine that with the amount of running that you do, barefoot, you can probably walk on just about anything.
Well, yeah, and I was a horrible person to ask whether a course was quote unquote barefoot friendly when we first started our online discussion group, because I had started out, like I said, on those trail races. I started running long distances. I was invited up with a group that runs mostly trails, hilly trails, and the guy that was the leader was the guy that won Catalina Island Marathon 13 times out of the first 20 years it was held, and that's a trail race also. So I was getting used to these gravelly trails, and so somebody would ask me if this road course was a barefoot friendly. I said, yeah, I did that. I didn't notice any problems. But again, if you start on extremely rough terrain like I did when I started building up my mileage, it all becomes dessert.
Okay, that's.
So anyway, I don't know exactly how thick my calluses are. I would probably have to do a dissection. I don't want to do that. But it's not like a hard, crusty callus like people might envision. And it's also not hamburger like other people envision. It's thick leather. It feels like I'm feeling the bottom of a moccasin or something.
Okay, so my girlfriend Stacy's the one who kind of turned me on to the barefoot running thing, and I haven't done it just yet. I'm not even a runner. I'm just starting to get into that space. And her feet, she runs barefoot. Okay. And her, thank you. And she's a barefoot runner, and the bottoms of her feet are exactly the way you described it. They're not all torn up. They're just they're
right.
They look like feet, and it's just amazing to me because I think when I take my first steps out onto a driveway and I step on one little rock, I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, that hurts.
Right.
And
besides the yelling, "Oh, that hurts," your other reaction is to bend your knee, kind of go limp.
Exactly.
That's the correct reaction, by the way.
Well, I'm glad
Don't
I got
run
that
stiff-legged. Right. Yeah. Well, again, that's if you're barefoot, it's a lot easier to learn.
So that's the feedback that you were talking about. Is when I stepped on something, I was all stiff-legged, all the weight was totally on top of the rock, and then by kind of going a little bit limp, it spread it out a bit anyway. It let me know something was there a lot quicker.
Right, and also. The bending of the knee actually kind of takes some of the pressure off the foot anyway. So you're actually adding another spring, which is a way bigger spring than, an inch of foam on the bottom of a shoe.
I'm like standing up right now, and I'm trying to bending my knee, and I'm stepping on stuff to test it out. And I'm like,
oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm like,
you put out all the jacks and the
the marbles and everything on the floor. I got to step on the kids' matchbox. And
right. Yeah. Oh, those are the best.
Yeah.
Legos.
Those are those little torture devices. Those Legos when you step on them. Oh man.
Right.
Oh. Okay. So
pretend you're sneaking up on somebody when you're walking on that stuff.
And
bend knees and
bending the knees.
Yeah, that's a big key. Don't bend over at the waist forward. You want your torso to be more or less vertical, mostly vertical. But that we'll get into that reason later when you actually start moving forward faster and faster. That starts becoming an issue. But also, if you're bent forward at the waist, so you got your shoulders in front of your waist, your back muscles are now strained, trying to maintain that posture. So that can add to back muscular injury and pain.
Now, would you see similar problems with backs, even if you're not a runner? Because I don't want any of my listeners just to think, well, I'm not I don't do a ton of cardio. I don't need to worry about this type of a thing.
Yeah.
But I know everybody has, they walk. Right. Just about everybody does.
Exactly. And I'm a big proponent of walking, and all these techniques transpose over to walking almost precisely the same. Like I said, the main difference is as you're moving faster, whether you're walking or running, you're going to be a little more on the forefoot, and if you're moving slower, you're going to be a little more back on the heel. But you want to use the whole foot in every step anyway. The only technical difference between running and walking is flight. Both your feet are off the ground at the same point or at the same time at some point while you're running. While you're walking, at least one foot or the other foot is on the ground.
Okay. And as we're talking about this, I'm walking around and I'm feeling my feet on the ground. I'm testing everything out that we're saying.
Yeah, and some people actually walk as fast as other people run. So.
I have seen a couple of those folks, but I think people are probably walking as fast as I can run.
Well, my sister does cardio walking, and I have to run sometimes to catch up with her. So. Of course, I'm also usually running with my dog, so there's a lot of pee stops.
Little pit stops, absolutely. Now, did your sister barefoot run?
She does. Well, actually, she's in Michigan, but she has done some running. Her son, my nephew, has done some barefoot running. But because she has a heart condition, she had rheumatic fever when she was young. So she mostly is walking, but she'll run down the hills, the short hills.
Oh, okay.
But we've done some 5Ks together, though. Actually, her and my older sister also. They both did some 5Ks barefoot with me.
So do you have basically the whole family going barefoot now?
No, my brother's not so much. The oldest one, he actually did sell one of my books to one of his coworkers, but he's pretty much a shoe guy. The other one has some other physical limitations due to getting hit by a car when he was 14 or so on a bicycle. He does bicycle and walk still. He does walk. I don't know if he bicycles anymore. He's in his 70s now.
So so that brings up an interesting. Oh well, you can't forget that. You better not forget that.
It's on the computer. So.
Thank God.
I know.
I was going to ask you a question about other sports and barefoot. Have you seen people transfer the barefoot approach to other sports? I would imagine things like bicycling, you got to wear a shoe. But like,
no, you don't.
I don't know.
No, you
like
don't.
You don't have to? I guess you don't have to.
No, you get those barefoot pedals first of all. But actually, I used to bike to work barefoot with. They were plastic, but they had teeth on them on a mountain bike. But what I did is I get the teeth fitting behind my toes and in front of the ball, and then the other teeth would be behind the balls of my feet, so that I was pressing with the balls on the center axle of the pedal. But then I got smart and got the barefoot, what they call barefoot pedals, which are just the old rubber ones like you had on your kids' bikes.
Nice and smooth enough anyway, so they don't dig into your
right. Yeah, and if you don't push too hard, if you keep in a low gear and do a lot of more faster cadence, then it's not as much force either.
Okay. So
which is actually the same in running.
So it's the same concept. Wait, you're just saying that. So because you're keeping it under more control as opposed to that kind of that blitz approach where you're bordering on kind of out of control, and you're putting stress on your feet.
As far as the cadence is, you're just taking more steps in a certain amount of time, and it's rather than trying to leap up and try and see how far you can go with each step. The funny thing is, in a lot of tests where they've compared that, the people trying to leap up and do a long stride actually end up with a shorter or the same stride as people who do a fast cadence and just run faster.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yep.
The cadence, your stride length comes not because you're pushing harder and trying to increase your stride length. The stride length comes because you're moving your body forward faster. And that actually comes from part of the technique is using a fast cadence with your feet. You're like you're spinning on a bicycle, and then moving your torso in front of your feet, and and it's a very subtle amount. You can't really tell by watching it, but if you can feel it when you're doing it. You move your body in front of your feet have to chase your body in order to try to get under your body again. And you end up moving faster. You're still using a fast cadence, and your stride length in time is shorter, but because your body is moving further in time, your stride length actually stretches out without having to try to, you're not trying to do a series of long jumps. You're just trying to move your body forward and then let your feet follow.
So, and the way you're describing it is, it sounds it's the natural approach to that, and it's naturally happening that your stride is lengthening.
Exactly.
If you force it, where you're actually purposefully trying to elongate your stride, it's so I think I know the answer, but I'll ask anyway. But it feels like you're putting unnecessary stress on different parts of your body where it's not good. You're going to end up pulling something. You're straining your your ankles, maybe your head.
What you're actually ending up doing is you're spending more time in the air. You're leaping up higher, not that much further forward, but you're leaping higher, which means you have to fall down further, and your body is accelerating the entire time that you're falling. So the longer time you spend in the air, the harder you land.
Okay. And then I'm going to guess you're generally almost stiff-legged too when you're forcing yourself to have that. You're stretching your feet way out in front of you. Your knee is probably, you're extending your leg totally knee locked, and when you land, it's a stiff landing.
There's a tendency to do that, yeah. Now, this is one of the other problems I have. A lot of tendency nowadays, and I love video. I'm actually a film major. There's a tendency to try to watch or videotape how somebody's running and analyze what they're doing and either copy that or criticize it or whatever. One of the problems we have with that is if you're going fast, you are going to be having to stretch your legs out further, but hopefully your foot is coming back by the time you land so that it matches the speed of the pavement underneath you. And your knee is starting to bend. Before you actually land, you're starting to bend your knee. But there's the point there in the picture where it looks like you've got your leg way out in front of you and you're going to crash. But you're only going to crash if you leave your leg straight out in front of you like that and wait for it to hit the ground before you do anything. You're actually hitting the brakes and slowing yourself down.
That's got to wreak havoc on your back too. My lower back is tensing up just at the thought of that stiff-legged kind of stomping around and move.
And the knees too. There's less nerve endings inside the knee joint, so people don't realize when they're damaging their knee until it's already damaged, and then they start feeling it. But yeah, I have this thing that I've been working on, the intentional and wait a minute, the word got lost to me here. Incidental movements. So when we watch somebody running, it looks like they're trying to stretch their leg out in front of them. It looks like they're pushing down really hard to launch their body into the air, but those are actually incidental to the process of running forward. They're not, the good runners are not actually trying to launch their body up into the air. They're not actually trying to stretch their foot out and land hard, Again, you got to watch the whole movement, but you still don't know how hard their foot is landing, what it feels like to the runner. So I like to focus instead of what it looks like to the viewer. What does your technique feel like to you? How does it hurt? Especially if you're barefoot on rough pavement. That's the ultimate test. Is barefoot on some rough pavement or gravel trails is the ultimate test of whether it hurts. And if it hurts, then you're probably doing something that could be more gentle. So you want to practice, like I said, that's the nutritional part of your run, the gravelly, rough roads, those are the parts that will teach you the most.
And basically, feeling out the spots where the pain is, and then literally you're just making those subtle adjustments to minimize it. And
Exactly.
through what you found is those minimal changes, or those changes, I should say, to minimize the pain. Those
right.
are the natural things that we should be doing.
Right, and that's how all of our ancestors, our prehistoric ancestors, learned to run. They didn't have shoes on to take off. They just go out and walk, and the terrain wasn't golf courses and beach sand. It was savanna in Africa or wherever, and it was all hard packed, not smooth completely. There might be bits of gravel and sticks and elephant turds laying around and all sorts of things. Even elephant footprints, and they might be going through mud, and that mud hardens into clay. I saw that a lot on the trails. You'd get these horses riding through there, and we get the rains, and the clay gets soft, and the horses ride through there, and then you get this all really uneven terrain. It's all hard packed clay, but really interesting textures. And that's, again, our prehistoric ancestors didn't have the luxury of protecting themselves from the terrain they ran on, and the whole idea they got to run on grass. Well, it wasn't golf courses. It wasn't manicured and groomed every day, and it wasn't even beach sand, which even that isn't all that safe, like I've talked about. They actually comb our beaches. I think once a week, maybe twice, more than that in the summertime. They probably rake them every morning before the tourists come down, at least to get the big stuff off.
To get all the stuff off.
Well, we get tens of thousands of people coming to these beaches in the summertime, and I'm in Southern California, and so they leave a lot of stuff there too, not just the clams and things like that. So. But actually, the clamshells usually remain behind. The rake doesn't pick up the clamshells and stuff.
Yeah, I think people are generally much worse than animals.
Yes. On the other hand, there's plenty of litter in the natural world, so it's not all smooth terrain.
Yeah, it's funny because as I became more exposed to this concept of barefoot running and the approach of barefoot running, and how you were saying you would pad your feet with these thick, bulky shoes to protect them, but you're actually doing more harm than good. It reminds me of other things that we do particularly in the world of health and fitness, where there's all these heavy-duty weight belts and different vests and braces and everything. And what you end up doing, you think you're protecting your wrists by putting on a certain brace so you can lift more, but you're actually causing it more damage. And it seems like it's a similar concept.
You're actually, anytime you're wearing something to protect your muscles from being strained, those muscles are going to atrophy a bit. Mm-hmm. So you may be able to lift 300 pounds with, a weight belt and ankle braces, but you're not actually lifting it with all of the muscles that you would need to use if you're in nature and decide, this log's in my way, I need to move it. It's only 200 pounds, it'll be no problem, but you don't have your weight belt and so you become dependent on these other things. It's like if you wear, boots that protect your ankles from twisting, your ankles are going to get weaker. Now, sure, you've protected them from, you don't get a twisted ankle very often, but as soon as you take your boots off, you probably will, as soon as you step on a Lego or something.
And I think most professional athletes, in some of the bigger sports anyway, basketball, football, and so forth, and I bet hockey's the same way too, I'm not 100%, but they'll tape their ankles. You get your ankles taped up before the game, and it's this whole self-perpetuating thing where it's like, I'll tape my ankles up real good so I don't twist them, but by taping them up before every practice and everything, you're not giving your body a chance to build up the strength in those spots so that you don't need them. And granted, they're massive, massive athletes. I mean, you're talking about 300 people, so it's kind of, to the other end of the spectrum.
And they are doing a lot more impact than running and making a lot of money at it.
Yes.
In some cases, not in every case, obviously, but yeah, a few cases there's an extreme financial reward there.
That is a pretty good carrot there.
Yeah. I suspect they may exercise their ankles at other times. So during a game, you might want to tape your ankles because it's going to be a little more extreme and unpredictable. Because if you could predict the game, then you wouldn't have to play it.
That's very true. Very well said.
Yeah. But it's kind of like, the kid that gets his first helmet, first thing he does starts hitting himself in the head with a baseball bat because he's got a helmet on.
That's right.
Something he wouldn't do without the helmet. Yeah. Something that he or she would never do without the helmet. Well, we do it once without the helmet and say, oh, that hurts. I'm not going to do that again.
That's it, exactly.
Because kids are pretty smart about that. Yeah. Kids are pretty smart about stuff like that. That hurts. I don't want to do that again.
They're smart.
So same thing. Yeah. So same thing with the one of the problems we have nowadays, because we have shoes available, is somebody steps out there on some pointy gravel and says, that hurts, I'm going to put shoes on. When they should be saying, that hurts, maybe I should land more gently.
Yep. So that's a similar thought. There's been a lot of discussion, and again, in the world of football, where they're wearing all of those pads, the shoulder pads, and these huge helmets, and all of this, that, and the other. And
they hit each other harder.
Harder and harder and harder. So they wear more gear so they can hit themselves harder. And there's more evidence of, CTE and head trauma, more and more for a variety of reasons. And the thought or the discussion that's afoot is, do you wear less protective gear? Therefore, people will hit less with less force, and you can still tackle somebody without, hitting them as hard as they're being hit, and then there'd be less injuries. So there's a conversation.
Yeah, I'm not much of a team sports fan, so I don't really get into these conversations. But the concept, I'm a kind of a conceptual guy anyway, so that all makes sense to me. But again, you've got so much money on the line there that you might just say, I can hit this guy really hard because I'm getting $1 million tonight for doing it.
I think at the end of the day with football, that's what happens.
Right. Yeah. There's, like you said, a big carrot. But, in friendly games, when I played football and things with my friends, we didn't have any gear. We had a ball, and we were lucky to have that. Then we might have a couple trees as goalposts, But, so we there was one guy that got hurt once in a game we played behind the high school once. He got smashed between two other people and broke a shoulder blade. But he was a real wiry guy anyway. He had no padding, even natural padding, really, to speak of.
I think it's funny. I think I can remember those types of freak injuries happening when I was younger too. But to your point, I remember playing a lot of games like that without any pads, and
nobody got hurt most of the time.
Yeah, you just adjust your approach so that you're like, I don't hit that way and it won't hurt, and I can still do what I need to do and have fun.
Right, and you play touch football or tails or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
I don't know if people pay a lot of money to play touch. I don't know if people pay much money to go watch touch football.
I can't imagine it would be anywhere near the amount of money people pay to see the pros play.
Yeah. It's hard to say, but again, I'm not a big fan of that stuff. I was a late bloomer, so I was usually the last pick to get on team sports. So I never really got into team sports. I never really felt welcome, and I didn't get a chance to practice because of that. So
is that kind of how you got into the running?
Probably because I can do that by myself. I don't mind running with groups, and but it's not really a team thing necessarily either. And it's not where, you have somebody picking teams and you end up, of course, I probably wouldn't be the last one picked anymore. But well, I might now because I'm in my 60s, so I'm a little slower than I used to be. But I did like one of our local running clubs. I think they still do it, actually. They do a relay race And we have a Central Park here in Huntington Beach too, not Manhattan, but they do a relay race, but it's all random drawings, and there's actually 4 legs and 4 people on a team, but there's a 1 mile, a 2 mile, 3 mile, and a 4 mile leg. And then you draw names out of a hat for each of those teams and legs. So you don't know who you're going to get. You don't know what distance you're going to get. And sometimes we'd be nice to people if they ran, a 50-kilometer race the day before and give them a 1 mile leg. And unfortunately, those are the people you want on the 4 mile leg because they can make up the lost time of slower people on the 1 mile leg. But yeah, if I did a 50K the day before, I might not want to do the 4 mile leg the next day.
I think I'd be in that same boat. I don't think I'd want to be doing anything after running 50K.
Except actually after I ran the only 50K I did run, and I had signed up for that and forgot that I had signed up for a 8-kilometer race the next day in San Diego. So I drove after I ran the 50K. I took a nap, and then I drove down to San Diego, and I took several naps on the way down there. It was, a few hundred miles. Probably more than that, probably 4 or 5. Anyway, it was a long ways. So I got down to San Diego, took a nap, and did the 8K. And I got actually PR'd in both of those races because they were the first ones I've done at those distances.
Wow, that's awesome.
But yeah, so it actually, and I have some friends that after a marathon or something like that do run the next day, not necessarily race, and I wasn't, going in full speed, obviously, the second day either. But actually helps you keep from stiffening up.
Oh, just to keep moving. Yep.
Right. So at least to go for a walk, or actually I did that after one of my fast marathon, first time I did a fast marathon. I laid down at first, which was a mistake, and my legs turned to stone. And then when they started loosening up, I got up and just walked around the town.
Well, I think that's pretty consistent. The kind of like almost like an extension of like the post-exercise stretching and kind of
right.
Dynamic
cool down.
To keep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, warm up and cool down. Yeah.
Well, I got to say, thank you so much for coming on here. I know we've been talking for a good 45 minutes, and I want to be mindful of your time. And I just want to say thanks again.
You're welcome.
Before we wrap here, I wanted to plug your book, Barefoot Running Step by Step. I'm in the middle of it. I'm not complete. I just got it a little while ago, and I got to tell you, it is a great read. I'm enjoying it.
Oh, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, my co-author Roy M. Wallach, he's does columns for the LA Times out here.
It was very well done. It's a nice read, and again, I'm not like I said, and I'm not a diehard runner, but I'm enjoying it, and I definitely recommend it for everybody who's listening.
Yeah, there's some books, a few books that I've gotten, and the same thing. If it doesn't matter whether you like running or not, or if you do it or not. If something's a good read, it's a good read. Like Born to Run, I'll plug Christopher McDougall's book, Born to Run, because he plugs my books. But no, because it's an enjoyable read. I gave a copy to my dad and my my uncle and my sisters and brothers, and they're not all runners, but my dad got through it within a couple days. He liked it so much. It's just an adventure story. And same thing, you read Harry Potter or something. It doesn't mean you have to be a witch to enjoy it, or a warlock.
Exactly.
or not. Wait a minute. Wizards. That's what it's about.
Wizards. Yeah. That's right. Wizards, or I guess you could be a muggle
terminology.
And enjoy it.
Right. Yeah, muggles can enjoy it too. Right.
There you go. Well,
all right.
Thanks again, Barefoot Ken Bob Saxton. Thanks so much for jumping on the show with me today. I truly appreciated it.
You're welcome, Rossi.